Okay, hi and welcome. I don't know if that's going to keep sounding like a robot or not, but I guess not. Welcome. Finally, you're in the right place. If you signed up to come to Lights, Camera, Action, we're going to learn about setting up a simple TV studio, introducing broadcast to your students. If you haven't already, if you have, how to kind of enhance that. I'm also going to be talking about techniques for you or your students to use on video, because obviously everybody's using video, and in a lot of instances the students are a lot more proficient than we are at this point, because they use it all over the place. So how many of you all are familiar with KET's News Quiz? Some, not all. Okay, great. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about News Quiz as well. So first, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I graduated here from the University of Kentucky. I have a master's in journalism from Northwestern University. I have worked in New York, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Charleston, South Carolina, and most recently in Louisville, where I was the host of a morning show here called Good Morning Kentuckiana for about 8 years. And from there, I went on to host News Quiz, which I'm thrilled to be able to be doing now. This is a huge passion of mine. I have 3 small kids that are in this age range, and so introducing kids in this age to current events and media, I think, is so important. And so I'm excited to be a part of News Quiz. So for those of you who do not know what News Quiz is, I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, and I think you should know what it is. And I think you should shout it from the rooftops and tell your whole school about it, because it is an excellent program. It's targeted to students in grades 4 through 8. But that's kind of lenient. My kids started watching it 1st or 2nd grade, I think, and but it is 37 seasons. So this is a long-running program. It's current events, but current events on their level. And I know one of the reasons I got out of local news is it's a little much these days, right? So I think especially you know, for kids, it can be really scary. And I think a lot of parents, myself included, don't even turn on the news at home anymore, because I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't want my kids to see something that they're not ready to know about. I think it's so important, on the other hand, though, that kids understand current events and know about the world and what's happening around them. And so News Quiz does a really good job of balancing both of those things and introducing topics that students can discuss and can form their own opinions about. And so we have an estimated audience of 160,000 plus students. And that's not only in Kentucky, that's not only in the US. It is global, and these are facts that I did not even know when I started News Quiz. Our producer, Allison, is back there, and she can tell you much more about News Quiz and how many schools we reach. But one of the really interesting things that I found out is the huge reach that News Quiz has. In fact, it's seen in internationally. I mean, Pakistan, we get letters from India and Sweden and Australia, and all of these students watching this program along with your students, I think, is a really cool concept, especially in many of the foreign countries use it as English as a second language. So I thought that was really interesting as well. So a lot of people want to know what it's like behind the scenes of News Quiz. And so I did take a little video. It's not very glamorous at all, but it is the studio and kind of where we shoot this. It's in our studio in Louisville. It's a small little studio. My video is not going to play very well, but it's just a desk camera. Your kids will probably ask you if they've seen it. You can tell them you've seen the studio of News Quiz. And yes, I use a teleprompter, and I do not memorize all the things and all the stories. We have a huge crew that works on News Quiz. We have a couple of producers, a director, and stage manager and teleprompter person. And so there's a lot of people who choose the stories and kind of create what goes into News Quiz that you see. Now, did anybody of you all watch News Quiz during the 2020 school year? No. Okay. So, you know, we had to change our studio, and this is my lovely basement, which is actually my kids' playroom, and probably, like many of you all, teaching school in a place that you did not plan to be teaching. And so we thought it was super important, though, that we kept that resource going. And in fact, we saw a huge increase in the 2020-2021 school year. The most popular resource on PBS Learning Media, we had a 69% increase. Okay, so as you can see, how many of you all ran into technical difficulties when you were trying to teach on camera? It is not anything that any of you all were very prepared for, but I salute you all because I was a parent watching my kids all have school in that same basement where I was recording this show. And so you guys are superheroes for all that you did during that time if you were working remotely. It was an interesting time, but I think what we all found is that we're going to have to get used to being on video, no matter if you are going back to remote teaching or you're just creating videos for your class. I'm sure you will use it a lot more now than you used to. And so that's part of what I'm going to talk about, not only getting your kids to be comfortable on video, but you too, because that is something that is going to be in the future, whether we like it or not. So the benefits of a media education, you all know all of this. You all see students who can flourish and learn from developing public speaking and communication skills, encouraging teamwork. Putting together a broadcast is one of the most biggest partnerships I've seen with people in general, because it really has a lot of different moving parts, and so encouraging students to work together in that way. The creative thinking and problem solving skills, you know, there's going to be technical difficulties. There's going to be lots of technical difficulties as you navigate how to work the camera and the microphone and get the stories and whatever. So encouraging them to think outside the box and get creative with how they're telling stories, and motivate them to be informed and curious about the world around them. That's what we try to do with News Quiz, and that's so important at this grade level. You can strengthen your school community, and this is something you can take back to your leadership if they are wavering on whether or not they want to include broadcasts. You're going to create a much stronger school community by sharing all the stories from everybody, even from families to different classes, what they're working on and that kind of thing, and advance the media literacy and critical thinking skills that are so important right now. So I'm going to go through this training that I do, and part of what I do now is corporate media training. And so I go to corporations and business leaders and entrepreneurs and teach them this exact same thing: how to come across conversationally on camera, how to be comfortable on camera, and how to look normal and professional on camera. So if you've ever said, I don't want to turn on my camera because I look old, I look fat, I've got like dark circles under my eyes, I sound awful, like this is going to cure all those problems, okay? Okay, this is the ultimate filter, okay? And it's really simple to do, and it's something that you can teach your students as well when they're creating broadcast for maybe even just a school project. But these are simple things. You don't need a lot of equipment, you don't need a lot of money, you don't need a lot of fancy stuff to make it work, because let's be real, y'all aren't getting a lot of money for broadcast in your school, right? So I like to call this the 3 L's of professional video, because I think it's a really easy way to remember. It's location, lighting, and looks. And if you go through and check these 3 boxes every time you're going to do a video, it's going to look so much more professional than if you didn't. Location, we'll talk a little bit about the place that you are filming your videos, background, that kind of thing. Lighting, you don't need expensive lights. I'm going to show you how to use natural light or even just a desk lamp to really enhance your lighting. And looks, and that's not like hair and makeup stuff, but it's how you're framed in the camera. It's the camera angle on you, and all of those things can make a big difference. So as far as location goes, obviously you want to limit distractions. Easier said than done, right? But if you are filming videos yourself or even creating a broadcast, you just want to find some place private. obviously, you want to limit your distractions, but you also want to limit the distractions of anything behind you. And we'll talk a little bit more about that with background, but you really want to limit all of any kind of distraction, because the main thing here is your content, right? No matter what you're doing on camera, what you're saying is what matters. And so it's really important to limit any other distractions so that that message gets through. Think outside the box. Just because like this is where my office is and this is where my computer sits does not mean I need to hit record or turn on the camera right here. Oftentimes I'll see people who have a window here and their desk is here, or even a window behind them. And if they just did like a simple move this way, oh my gosh, you're 10 years younger. And so it looks a lot better depending on your lighting. So don't get anchored to your desk or your workspace or even your broadcast studio that's in the closet of your library at your school. Try to think outside the box and film your videos in different places. We'll talk a little bit about sound versus noise, how to enhance your sound, microphones, that kind of thing. We'll talk about lighting and background as well. So as far as limiting distraction, we talked a little bit about this already. You want to create that privacy, think outside the box, and find some depth without the distraction. So I always say I have a lot of clients who like to do a video right here. And they're like, okay, this is perfect background. I'm going to do it right here. It's blank. There's no distraction, right? Wrong. You look like you're in a hostage video. There is nothing behind you. You look like you're in the closet. And so what you want to do is create a little bit of depth. So say I do have to use this wall. If I turn this way and maybe set up my camera this way, had a little bit of depth behind me, put a little light on my face, it's going to look a lot more professional. Even if you have like seats or furniture or the bookshelf or anything behind you, that's great. All those kind of props can be helpful to you as long as they're not distracting from your message. And so think about using depth. As far as sound, how many of you all have dealt with bad audio when you're doing videos or meetings or anything? It is probably the hardest thing to do. Now, you want to cancel out sound. You want to cancel the noise and enhance your sound. And so obviously a microphone is a great way to do this if you have to. There are a ton of different microphone options, and I'll show you some of those as well. You don't have to have a microphone though. The point is, the biggest problem I think most people have is an echo. Do you ever watch your videos back and you're like, it's so echoey, I can't even understand what they're saying? Well, an easy way to do that is think about absorbing sound. So there's probably some science teachers in here or something that can explain this a lot better than I do, but sound waves travel and they bounce off things, okay? So when you're in a bare room without carpet or furniture, it's gonna be a lot more echoey, right? Just obviously. But one way to kind of directionalize your sound a little bit is to prop up some pillows, like even some pillows behind your computer or around where you're recording your camera. So have you ever been in a radio studio where they have like the padded walls and stuff? That's exactly what it is. They're trying to cancel out the echo because the furniture, pillows, the foam walls, anything like that absorbs sound and it makes your sound a lot richer. And again, goes straight to your message instead of distracting from your message. So you can use those kinds of props to create a sort of sound chamber. So if that's something you run into, you don't have it in your budget for a microphone, that's an easy fix. Now, a microphone is a great option if you can do it. And there are some very cheap options, particularly the kind that can just like go right into your phone or whatever you're recording with and clip on. So that's another thing. Okay, yes.
I'm sorry, like you were talking a lot about different microphones. Is there anything specific that we need to look for when we look at buying a microphone?
Yes, and I will give you a whole list of my product recommendations at the end of this, and it'll include some of my favorite microphone and brands and that kind of thing. I'd say the main thing to look for is connectivity, obviously. Figure out what you're creating your broadcast with. Is it a phone? Is it an iPad? Is it a computer? Is it a webcam? And make sure your microphone connects to it because it's not universal. So that's A number one. You have to make sure it connects to your camera. And then second of all, what are you going to use it for? I think the lapel mics that like clip on are a lot easier, particularly for students, because if you do this thing with the students, they're like eating the microphone, or it's like still over here when they're asking a question. And so that's a whole other like course you got to teach on how to handle a microphone. So I think the clip-ons are the best way to go, particularly with students, and probably if you're filming a video too, because let's be honest, you don't need to be thinking about anything else besides what you're teaching or what you're saying. So it kind of keeps it out of sight, out of mind. As far as background, I think it can be the most distracting thing, because obviously, how many crazy backgrounds did you guys see with students trying to be fun? It's the worst, right? Like, it's just so distracting. And the same goes for you in any kind of video. Now, that being said, kids love a green screen, right? So I teach a broadcast class, and we painted a wall in the library green. Works great. This is a look at how we use it. So we have just bricks painted green. That's our green screen. They like to use it as like the anchor desk. And we put a picture of the school behind them. Now, the main thing is you just don't want it to be distracting. So, I mean, moving pictures are bad. Bright colors are bad. But if you can find a nice, easy picture of the school, or take a picture of the library and have them sit in front of books or whatever and put it up there, that's an easy way to do it, because kids really do think it's super cool to use the green screen. Okay. Second L is lighting. I'm going to make sure we're kind of staying on time here. And okay, so in this section, I'm going to talk about using windows, using natural versus ambient light, and a 3-point lighting skill to help you set up. So this is a look at using your windows really well and using your windows very poorly. So again, a lot of you probably have a nice place you're working at home, or maybe in your office, where you have a beautiful view behind you and you think, that's great, I want to show the ocean that my apartment is on top of, or whatever. So no, you actually don't, because then we can't see your face, and that's called backlighting. And so what you want to do is turn towards that light and then create a nice professional looking background that is not distracting behind you. Use your windows to your advantage, because news studio or movie studio lights, they're all trying to recreate natural light. So if you have the real deal, use it. It's really simple. Now, obviously, we don't all have a beautiful view and a nice window where we can use that for our viewing our natural light. So you can use the manufactured light as well. Best case scenario is you use a combination. So what you want to try for is about 80% outside light and 20% of your manufactured light. So in a best case scenario, you'd have a nice big window with sunshine in front of you, and maybe a couple of lights on either side so you don't have shadows on your face. Best case scenarios don't always happen. So if you can't do that, that's fine too. But if you always keep in mind the rule of 3-point lighting, this is something that is used in everything from television news to movie making. You want to have all 3 sides of your face, and yes, your face has 3 sides, as lighting, as a triangle around your face. So your main light should be directly in front of you, but you don't want to create shadows on the sides of your face, because that is when you think you look tired and old. That's why, because it's bad lighting. And so especially if you put the light here and you fill it in, it's a great big bright picture of your face. Now, if you just have an overhead light, that's why you have circles under your eyes. It's coming down from the top and there's nothing at the bottom. And so you have shadows under your eyes. You don't really look that bad, but on camera, you really can feel like you do, right? And then if you just have the light from below, we've all held a flashlight in a tent to tell scary stories. You look pretty creepy, right? Same thing goes for a light underneath instead of above. So what you want to do is try to have all 3 sides of your face lit evenly. And that way you're going to avoid any problems. Here's an easy picture of what your this woman looks like with just an overhead light is the first picture. This is where she has lights on the side, and you can see one side is kind of totally shadowed. Now, it's not bad. It doesn't look bad. I mean, it's obviously like perfectly fine, but look how much brighter and more interesting she looks when she has the direct bright light on all three sides of her face. I've kind of been glossing over these little Post-its, but they're little pro tips I hope you've been looking at. Just like if you don't have an extra light, and like I said, the desk lights are perfectly fine. So if you have a desk lamp, just flip it up towards your face. And even if you have a lamp, take the shade off the lamp and just use the light bulb. It works perfectly fine. So these are all things that you have around your house, and like a ring light, that's exactly what that's trying to do, is light all sides of your face evenly. So that's great. If you can buy a ring light, perfect. But if you don't have that, get a couple lamps, put them up over here and flip your desk lamp to go on your face or get in front of a window. So there's all kinds of little tips and tricks that you can do to work with what you've got already. The white computer screen can help fill in light. So if you have like a white piece of, have you ever seen like when they're doing like a news reporter is out in the field, they have the big gigantic like reflectors. Those are trying to fill in light and use the natural light to bounce off and fill in that space. You can do that with like a white sheet of paper even. So if you think you need a little extra light and you're out of desk lamp, like tape a white sheet of paper up like next to your computer screen or your camera, wherever it is, and that's going to reflect a little light and put some light on your face too. So that's a little thing you can use too. Okay, so this is the third L, and I promise after this, we're going to do some Q&A on this section and then get into implementing this for broadcast, okay? Because I feel like you all might have some questions. Okay, so the looks part of this, and this again is not hair and makeup or anything like that. It is all about how you are framed or your students are framed in a camera. You want to look professional. You don't want to distract from your message. And so this is another way that you can do that. We'll talk about what kind of headroom, how you can get eye level with the camera, framing, and you'll be surprised at how many people, CEOs of companies say, where do I look? You look at the camera. But people get very confused about that, particularly when it's really hard to see, like where is the camera on my computer? Is it down here? Is it up here? It's like coming at me. You've got a webcam somewhere else. So, so that's something else. So here's another look at how camera angles can make you look your best or your worst. And so this is just a simple change in how your camera is positioned. Unfortunately, a lot of us use our webcams on our computers, which are a little below us. And so we are looking down at them, and that's where you get the double chins. And you're like, oh my gosh, did I gain 10 pounds? No, you just have a bad camera angle. So what you want to do is eliminate all that headroom and avoid this kind of what's called an upshot, which means it's looking up at you. And the main way to do that is think about where your camera is. Again, identify where your camera is, and then get eye level with it. Make sure the camera is at your eye level. Now, what you think is your eye level is a little bit lower than it actually is. So when you think like, oh, yeah, I'm sitting at this desk and I'm eye level. No, you're not. So there's like the pro tip here, you can see, I just use books underneath there, whatever you got, prop it up. You bring it up to about here and then your eye level, okay? And so that can make a huge difference in, but this goes for, you know, your students on camera too. Whether you've got it set up with an iPad or whatever you're recording on, help them learn how to bring it up to eye level and frame themselves the right way. This is another easy rule. It's called the 1/3 rule. And you'll recognize these kind of lines from your iPhone. On your photos, there's an option where it has like the grid lines. Have you ever been like, what are those for? Well, this is exactly what it's for. This is how you professionally frame a human on video. You make sure you divide your screen into thirds, and at that first line is where you want your eyes. And so that's an easy rule that's going to give you just enough headroom and have kind of shoulders and head in the photo or the video. And that's a great professional rule to follow to make sure that that camera's eye level and you're framed in the right way. Okay, just to review, because I know I threw a lot at you right there. The 3 L's. So location. You want to limit your distractions. Use that directional audio. Think about using props, maybe as a sound chamber. Create depth behind you. And your background does matter. Limit those distractions behind you and around you. For lighting, use your windows. This is probably one of the main mistakes I see people do too, is not use the windows to their advantage, not use that actual sunlight, the daylight that you have right there on your face. Use the combination, outside and ambient lighting, use them both together, and use the 3-point lighting rule where you have a triangle around you with lights. And then looks. Keep in mind the headroom and the 1/3 rule that we talked about, and get eye level with your camera. So that's kind of a condensed version of my corporate training about being on camera, and this doesn't even touch on like being conversational and that kind of thing, but just purely setting up a professional studio that costs no money at all. You absolutely do not need the professional equipment. Now, of course, the professional equipment will enhance this, but if you don't have that option, these are some things that you can use. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick Q&A if you guys have questions so far, and then I'll go into more about implementing these for a broadcast class or broadcast club. All right. Oh, yeah.
We use YouTube Live to broadcast.
Wonderful.
And what tools have you found where you can use that and take the green screen aspect and import it to YouTube Live? So it's all
That is a good question. There are a lot of programs that can do it. It is, a lot of them will cost money. It's a subscription or that kind of thing. One of them is, I'm going to forget the name of it.
We use OBS.
Is it Streamcast or Stream?
Screencast.
No, that is one. That is a good program, but there are several that can go particularly with YouTube. The one that we use is iMovie. It's free on an iPad, but I don't know that it can do live. Like if you're doing YouTube Live, I don't think you can do that. OBS is a good one. OBS Studio, yes, absolutely does that.
It's like not going to be easy for younger children. You have to
Yeah.
Background.
Yeah. I'm gonna think of the one that's in the back of my mind soon. But that's, I think, the biggest hurdle is figuring out all the different platforms and technology and what works with what, and like your iPhone's gonna work with something and your iPad's not. What we do for our broadcast club, we have iPads and we let them record on their iPads, and then they edit in iMovie, and then we put together and send out the broadcast. It's not live. So that's a different kind of beast. Yeah.
Kelsey, we had somebody on the Zoom who suggested Padcaster.
Padcaster. That's not what I was thinking of, but yes, that is a good one. Thank you, whoever suggested that.
You mentioned, I know that you're going to be talking about other equipment later. But you mentioned things like having a microphone. If I were to have a camera fixed on you right now, it might be hard for the camera to pick up your voice, wouldn't it? Are there certain like clip-on microphones or something like that that you'd recommend?
Yes.
Can I talk about that later?
Yes, I think, and I'll show you one that I actually use all the time. It's called Solid brand. But this is one that I like because it has different adapters, and I probably don't even have, oh, here it is. But so this I can put straight into my iPhone, which is what I was recording News Quiz with when we were at home. I just did it right there on my iPhone. This plugs in right to your iPhone. This clips here, and so it goes directly into it. It also has an adapter if you're using it for a computer or something else. It'll go into an iPad too. So that's the main thing when you're looking for them on Amazon or wherever. Just make sure you know what camera you're using. So that's kind of step one, as long as you know that it's going to work with the camera. Now there are like remote options but I would not recommend it just because the connectivity is very difficult, like as far as like a wireless. And really, if you're working with students, I feel like you can get close enough where you can have a wire, just hide the wire. But there are some like, remote ones where you could move away from the camera and it's wireless, but they're very difficult to sync up correctly in my experience.
What was the name of your one that you have?
It's called Solid, SOLID. And on my website, which is kelseystarks.com, you can go and at the very bottom, there's a place to sign up and get all of my technical recommendations. And you'll get like a PDF file that has the cameras, the lights, microphones, everything like that I've kind of tried. And from big budget, like here's an expensive version, here's a cheaper version, and you're welcome to download that and use that as much as you can for actual equipment. More questions? Okay, well, let's start talking about broadcast then. So how many of you all do a broadcast class or club or something currently? Great. Okay, and are the others of you thinking about implementing it maybe? And okay, great. Well, then we are right on track. Okay, so you'll notice I like alliteration, so I apologize for that. But these are what I came up with as a 4-step process for creating your broadcast club or your class or anything like that. Plan, you're going to figure out what kind of plan. These are questions that you need to ask yourself before you even get into dealing with students. Kind of organize your thoughts. There's a lot of different questions you need to answer about what kind of broadcast you want to create. Prepping is another thing that you need to do before your students even get involved, and that comes down to equipment, your setup, how you're going to broadcast it, all of those things. Practice, I think it's important that you teach students the right way to tell a story. Telling a story on broadcast is a lot different than writing a story in your English class, and the differences there and how they can create a story for broadcast and script it correctly. And then publish. We'll talk about some of those different platforms and things to publish your broadcast to the school or your school community. So the first part is planning. And so I think the main question that you need to figure out is, do you want to do a broadcast with broadcast stories and sort of longer form, or do you want to make like daily announcements? It's a lot different. A lot different things go into each of those. They're not, and it'll probably matter what age students that you have. The broadcast class that I teach is for 4th graders. And so we do once a month and we only meet once a week. So that goes into timing. maybe you have a class that meets every day. Well, then you're going to have a lot more time to put something together. You could even do a daily broadcast. I started doing our weekly announcements when I was in high school, and that's one of the things that made me interested in journalism and probably shaped my entire career. So you never know which of those kids you're working with are going to go on and think this is like a great career for them. No matter what, though, the kids that you're teaching are going to be using this skill. I don't care if they are in finance. I don't care if they are in, consulting, if they are working in politics. It does not matter. They are going to benefit from learning how to communicate on camera, period. So I think it's really an important skill and one that you guys are great for, putting out there for them. So the next thing is content. And that's another thing you need to decide is what kind of content you want to create. You want to do like longer form stories. A lot of our kids like to do a whole story about the Beta Club. And so they'll go out and interview people and then tell us about the Beta Club. Or maybe you just want to have content like, here's what's coming up this week. We've got, the basketball championship, and we've got a poetry contest, and Miss Brown has the readathon or whatever is going on. So kind of decide what you want your broadcast to look like and include. And then another thing is assigning jobs, and you need to decide whether you want to assign jobs. So-and-so wants to be on camera, and that's great. Like let's let her be the reporter or the anchor. Johnny doesn't like being on camera, so you're going to let him run the camera. Or do you want to encourage Johnny to try being in front of the camera and develop his public speaking skills a little bit, and let Sarah, who really wants to be on camera, maybe take a back seat in some classes. So I think there's pros and cons to how you're going to assign the jobs, and you can decide if they are permanent jobs. Is this the job you have all year long? Or maybe every broadcast you switch it up and let everybody try a lot of different jobs. So you kind of got to know, obviously, your students and what you're working with in order to decide this. So those are some questions you need to ask yourself before you even get started. Here's a look at some of the jobs, and this is how it is in real news, but I think a lot of the terms get kind of confusing. And so this is how we use it. So a producer is somebody who writes all the scripts and writes the content for something. A director is the person who decides how it looks. And so that would be the person who helps shoot the videos, maybe edits, depending on what kind of broadcast you're doing. And a reporter would be somebody who goes out and collects stories and interviews people and schedules the interviews and chooses the sound bites. Obviously, they work very closely with the producer because the producer is writing the stuff that they are using. So all of these jobs are very interconnected, and it's not like you're just the director, because the photographer is also responsible for shooting video. So the director has to say, I want to get some video of this, and you go out and get the video for this. And then they bring it back, and then the director can edit it together. So they all work together very closely, and they're very intertwined. And then the studio crew would basically be all of these jobs for the studio. So you have somebody who writes the script for the anchors. Instead of a reporter, it would be the anchor who's doing the broadcast there at the desk. And then the director would edit the whole thing together in the end. And the photographer would run the camera in the studio. Does that make sense? So obviously this can change however you want it set up, but I think that it's kind of a good formula to follow when you're trying to figure out how to tell people what to do and when. These are some great content ideas that I think go over really well. Some of them are going to be better for a broadcast, longer form broadcast. Some of them are better for like an announcements type thing. And this is the time to get creative. This is the time to tell your students like, hey, what do you think should be in our broadcast? Because a huge part of this is the buy-in, right? And a little bit of ownership that they're like, yeah, this is our thing. And that they put the product out in the world that they helped create. And this is kind of a starting point or jumping off point, at least, to tell them, like, why don't we do a featured faculty member? And what does the library do all day? The librarian, what do they do? Who's, the custodian? What does he do? And, how about the lunch ladies? When do they get here? Do they actually make all that food? All these questions. You could do a simple weather report. Again, the kids love the green screen. Super simple to say it's going to be sunny or rainy or whatever. An alumni spotlight is kind of cool. Be like, hey, did you know that Principal Johnson actually went to this school? Let's do an interview with them. A featured club, you could do weekly or daily or monthly, however you want to do it. Hey, did you know what the Beta Club does? Here's the look at inside their meeting. Maybe you want to join this club. Here's how. Sports highlights, obviously, you could do a quote of the day. PSAs are another one that's a great learning experience for kids to put together. Students love interviewing other students. I mean, at least my elementary school students do. And the problem with that is you got to cut them down a little bit because they'll just talk forever and ever. So I'll talk about that in scripting a little bit. But birthdays, you could go every month and say, these are the people with birthdays. Book reviews and recommendations are great. I love when kids are like, hey, I read this book. Here's a little bit about what it's about. It would be great if you like animals, whatever, or even talk to your librarian about doing a little like, here's our book of the month and it's April. So this is all about, the Easter Bunny or whatever. So those are some ideas for content. Okay, so step 2, prep. And this is another thing that you want to kind of decide before the students even get involved. Your studio setup. Where are you going to have your studio? You learned all of these techniques that can help you make a studio out of the bathroom if you have to, right? Like you can use all of those for setting up a studio anywhere. If you can use a green screen, I think it's a great tool to have if you need it. You don't need it. And I think you can set up a nice background or do it in front of the school or in front of the library or the office or wherever. Are you going to be able to have a teleprompter? Are you going to be able to, how are you going to do a script? My broadcast club doesn't. So we write in Sharpie and tape it to the bottom of the iPad and say, here's what you're saying. And so that's a makeshift teleprompter. It can work. I think it's really important though to help students develop those public speaking skills so that they're not reading off the paper and they are more confident to just talk about the story that they did. So if they went out and got a bunch of interviews from the basketball team and the basketball coach, they should be able to come up with 1 or 2 sentences to introduce that story on camera without reading a script. So kind of think about it like that. Your studio equipment. Like I said, we use iPads. I don't think it's the best thing to use. If you can, there's so much technology out there now though. You can use, your laptop camera. The best easy camera out there is a cell phone, honestly. Like the video on your iPhone is great and can be used anywhere. Now, I know like you're not going to use the kids' phones, or did you have a question? Okay, sorry. So iPad works, even getting like a webcam that hooks up to your computer, you can use that. You can take it wherever you want. They're like this big. So that's something, it's just very different from the days of like the, so microphone lights, we already talked a little bit about, and you can look at all the equipment on my website. The software, again, we talked a little bit about that too. The editing, we use iMovie. There are a ton of different options out there, Screencastify OBS for the cameras. I'm not going to remember the one that I'm trying to, but there are just a ton of options out there. And so figure out like what you have to work with budget wise and beyond, and figure out like, do I need an app? Do I need extra equipment or anything like that? Okay, as for practice, there is a big difference between writing for a broadcast and writing for a newspaper or even a paper at school, because your audience listens to words differently when they hear them versus when they read them. So when you're reading something, you can take in a lot more words and extraneous blah, 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 like flowery language. And that's great for creative writing, and I love that. But when you're writing for broadcast, it is clear, concise, conversational. It is to the point, and you have to keep it tight. And this is a great skill for students to learn, because it is very difficult to put a lot of information in like a minute and a half. But that's kind of what you're going to have to do, especially if you're coming up with this broadcast. So here's a look at a script. If you're doing like a story kind of idea, where you're having kids go out and do interviews and put what's called a package together, like the news, this is kind of the structure that you can use. Now, I think it's really important too, which I learned, a lot of students have never seen a news package. It's when they don't watch the news. So I realized, like I was telling my students about, you know, like when they toss to a reporter and the reporter's there and then they have a story, they're like, huh? So that's brand new to me. But I think it's really important to find sort of a clear, easy to follow package on the real news or on YouTube or something to show them first and say, this is what I'm talking about. Like, you'll have a reporter and they will have a beginning, middle, and end to the story. And kind of teaching that story structure is great for them to learn. And it's so helpful in their writing, because they're going to learn how to cut down just the most important parts, and they learn that writing style that that's going to be great and helpful for them in the future. So obviously in this one, I don't know how I see it though, but so the anchor says, hey, we've just done a quick recall story, obviously. Quick recall isn't the only competition happening in our school. The basketball season is in full swing. Here's a look at what's happening. Then you go to the reporter who says, oh, hey, thanks, Alicia. The basketball team is currently 4-2 for the season. They're hoping for a spot in the tournament at the end of the month. Then you got kind of the meat of the story. You have a soundbite with the coach who says, yeah, I think this team has great potential to go all the way and win. They look great in practice. And then it says, hey, the cheerleaders are a big inspiration for the team too. And then you've got a soundbite with the player who says, I love hearing the cheers from the stands and blah, blah, blah. Everything's great. And then there's an end and a conclusion and a way to look ahead and wrap it all up at the end. Hey, you can still go see the Knights on the court. Their next game's March 4th. The end. That's like less than a minute story. They have 3 interviews. And so the thing is, the most difficult part for you is that they're going to go out and do these interviews. They're going to talk to the coach and the player and the cheerleaders for about 45 minutes each. And then they're going to come back with all this video and they're like, well, I talked to the coach and his favorite color is purple. You know, it's like, no, we don't need all that. And being able for them to listen to the interview and take out the information. He said, so say you ask the coach, like, so how many games have you won? He's like, well, we're 4-2 for the season. They're like, oh, well, we have to put that in, right? And well, you don't have to have the coach saying it. You pull out that nugget and you put it in. The reporter says, hey, basketball team's currently 4-2. What you want to hear the coach saying is, hey, this team looks great, because the reporter can't say that. You see? So anyway, that's kind of higher level, probably for more like middle high school, but it's really important for them to understand that story structure. Okay, and then finally, presenting. And there's a lot of different platform options for this. We use YouTube too. We have like unlisted link. And so a couple other questions you need to ask yourself or your school leaders, just what kind of sharing do you want? Is this going to go to all the parents? Is this going to go to just the students? Is it going to be shown every week? Is it going to be shown every month, every day? Is it live? Is it recorded? So we record ours, edit it all together, and send out the unlisted link to the teachers. Now, we had a problem with the teachers did not watch it. Like, they don't have time. I don't have time to show 12 minutes of, you know, gobbledygook in my 40-minute class. So you've got to kind of get the kids involved in how they're going to increase viewership. Like, that's a skill as well. How are you going to market your show? How are you going to tell, you know, make other students and teachers want to watch it? Do you create like some teases throughout the week, maybe in the newsletter, like, hey, don't forget to tune in. You'll hear what the coach has to say about the, you know, basketball game coming up, or you'll never believe what the cheerleader said about the whatever, you know. So there's ways to get them kind of involved with like teasing the story. Getting other students involved is a great way too, not just the students in broadcast. Let them go out and interview other students about like, hey, what holidays do you celebrate in winter time? And you talk to somebody about all the different holidays that are celebrated across your school. And then that student is like, I want to see that broadcast because I'm in it. And so they want to see your interview. So, you know, that's an important part of it too, is to kind of encourage that viewership and figure out how you're going to share it, when you're going to share it, and keeping it short. This is when that comes in, like this, that's imperative, because you can't have a 30-minute broadcast. No teacher is going to be able to show that. So you keep it short if at all possible. And so maybe it is once a month or once a week or something like that. And maybe you can make it longer then and give them a whole month to watch it, or whenever they can fit it in, that kind of thing. So those are kind of the things that I have learned so far from kind of implementing broadcast for schools and students. I would love to hear any questions that you have, and I will try to answer them as best I can. And I'd love to hear like what you guys are doing in your broadcast or broadcast classes. Yeah.
I just want to share one more sophomore thing that I actually,
Great.
software, I'm sorry, that
Yeah.
I just discovered. That
Perfect.
it's been announced, and I discovered it and tested it out in spring. For if you're at the stage where you're creating a rundown, where they write the scripts, I've been doing like Google Forms and 2Com and then having to tab to get it back.
Yes.
It's called rundowncreator.com.
Yes. We use that in NewsQuest.
It is very user friendly. It is, if it gives with a click, you know, insert VO, insert packet with the directions, it's aligned, it's streamed, you can put it on your tablet, your phone, I think it's like,
You can run a teleprompter off of it.
you can run a prompter on it if you have that. And I think we just bought it for the coming year. I was testing out myself for my class, but with the kids, where you get the license where it's like 450 or something like that for the year, and then all the kids can collaborate. So it's rundowncreator.com.
Great.
Highly recommend that.
And that's for scripting?
For rundown creation, where you would stack a show where you're like first story, second story.
Okay.
So you build, so I compare it when I'm teaching this. It's like when you do an outline for a paper.
It
A
is.
rundown is your outline for your show. And then, like, I have my show and I click on each one and it opens up the thing to write the
script, yeah.
script. And it's outstanding.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Yes, that's what we use in NewsQuest. So should have mentioned that. Great. Yeah.
Can we have access to that PowerPoint?
Sure. Yeah. I can do that.
We'll also put it on the AT website after the event, for all the sessions.
Okay. And then I'll get my slides to one of you all and make sure you can view those.
I wanted to share, you can turn your Chromebook into a teleprompter. There's a couple apps that do that, or extensions or whatever they're called, but
Yes.
teleprompt is one we use.
Uh-huh.
And it's worked very well. I will say that the kids prefer somebody to actually manually do it than
Right.
for it to run, but it works pretty well.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great option. And just what I was thinking when she said rundown creator, like if you don't have a teleprompter, you can use your computer as a teleprompter anytime. Just set it up there right by your camera. So that's
What was the
easy.
name of that app? We couldn't hear back here.
Teleprompt is the one that I use, but there's a lot of them.
And in that rundown creator, that there's an option too, to just like, when you click on the script, go to teleprompter and it'll like automatically pull it up as your script. And, yeah, that's a great option too. I have a whole like class I do on teleprompter reading and so that's another thing, but, go ahead.
If you use Pages and all,
Uh-huh.
then if you go into presenter mode, it's an automatic teleprompter
Oh,
for you.
I did not know that.
It's free and
Pages and Apple, write that down. Nice.
Go into Pages, create your entire content pages, then you go into the three dots, go into presenter mode, and it will automatically change sizing, font, color, background,
Wow.
auto scroll, how fast you want it to scroll, how slow you want it to scroll. It's been a really impressive work.
Nice. They're in the back.
I was gonna say, that's kind of along the same line, but, I have a morning meeting group that we go live every morning from the library. And they, because I was tired of the sheet paper and then looking at it, not looking up. So we put it on our smart board, which is behind our video,
Mm-hmm.
and the kids scroll through each other.
Yeah.
And that's just, we already do it in Google Doc anyway, so we just change it what we need for every day in Google Docs.
Perfect.
And they just read right up.
Yeah, that's great. Yes.
So this is not software minded, but I was glad you mentioned that, teachers say they don't have time to watch the shows.
Yes.
So if you want to align these to the media arts standards, everything she just talked about aligns to the ACRE standards completely. So like the plan, prep, practice, the ACRE standards 1, 2, and 3. The publish is 4, 5, and 6. And then she didn't mention ACRE standards for it, but when she said you have your students watch a package to learn what it is, that's responding to the arts, which is ACRE standards 7, 8, 9. And then 10 and 11 connects all of that together. So if you need some support,
Even know.
administrators to say, this is why we need a broadcast club. She just talked about all 11 ACRE standards for K through 12.
Great. Wow. Who knew? Great. Well, I think it is, I cannot stress enough the importance of students learning media literacy, and the best way to learn it is by creating it themselves. And I could talk for hours about the importance of that and raising these good, critically thinking, problem solvers. So I think it's really important. And like I said, it's going to be that one student like me who it absolutely changed my life and the course of my career. But it's, the 20 other students in my class who are better in whatever job they're doing now because of being a part of it. So I think it's really important.
Do you recommend, I know sometimes when people see their shows, but, we'll display, like, they'll have the green screen and display, pictures.
Right.
What's good for that?
For like creating the green screen or inserting it, you mean?
Yeah, like inserting pictures.
So I think iMovie makes it really easy. You just like have a picture and you just go to like green screen and like it's right behind you. That's really the only one that I'm sure there's a ton of other options out there. Any kind of editing software, I think. Yeah. And then, as far as getting the, images, it's just taking a picture. Google search, like, you can find them all.
I found too, like, when we were remote,
Uh-huh.
I just got literally the roll of butcher paper,
Right,
the green.
Yeah.
School green butcher paper, dropped them off at the kids' houses. And then that allows them to do their green screen.
Oh, perfect.
So,
Yeah.
it don't feel intimidating, you have to have the view. That's
Exactly.
lovely if you can get it painted, but literally grab the butcher paper.
yeah, that's great.
And they taped it to their walls at home. and it
Works.
worked
Yeah,
beautifully.
yeah.
Something that's been really beneficial for my class, my school, is I have gotten to Walmart, just gotten felt rolls, and then hold them up, and then each, I have a green screen to go box, so teachers can take it to their classroom or on one spot.
Oh, that's great.
So they just hit them up on bulletin boards rather than your classroom.
Yeah, it's portable. That's a great idea. And I think I hope you guys will take all of this and back to your schools and teach and, let other teachers know how, there's a ton of ways you can implement media and broadcast, public speaking into any kind of class. And so I know a lot more are using video now, but I think it's kind of a untapped learning opportunity for kids to learn how to properly use video, look professional, and create the content that that's good to put out there in the world. Anything else? Oh, we're right on time.
It just sounds like we're all using so many different apps and programs that it'd be kind of cool to talk more about what works for us.
I know. I think it would be helpful to come up, like, I don't know how you all collaborate or if you do at all, but to kind of come up with even like a document you share, which is like, this worked, this didn't work, and I don't know, but because there are too many options out there for sure.
I'd like to find a video editing thing where more than one person can edit at the same time. That way, it's not just one person.
WeVideo can do that,
Everybody can.
but it costs. Like, it's not free.
Subscription,
To be
yeah.
able to have kids collaborate, but that it is the best thing that I found for that.
WeVideo, yeah.
I'd have to look. My district bought it, so I don't know.
And it works on a Chromebook.
And it worked, it's web-based, so they can.
Yeah.
From home.
iMovie works on it.
No, I movies only on iPad
Yeah.
Okay.
or Mac. Yeah, WeVideo works on in.
Well, then we'll work on it.
The video, that's what we had.
Oh,
to
we
do during
video.
remote.
Yeah, I thought you were talking.
No, I'm a huge.
Yeah.
And their tech support's very good.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Feel free to